everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bree Buonomo. Hi if you're new here, or hey if you've been here before. And today I'm going to dive into another discussion video around the topic of getting paid critiques when you are about to query. So this video is completely all of my own opinions. I'm not being influenced by anyone. It's just kind of how I've experienced things going into the query trenches and what I think may or may not benefit potentially other writers when they are about to get ready to query. I don't necessarily think this information would be 100% on point for every single person that watches this video, but I do hope to kind of shed some light about how my own experiences have been, and maybe this could help other people as they are trying to explore querying in a very saturated and intense market. We're going to start off with just answering the question straightforward of, do you need to buy a query critique package before you query? Query critique packages can be anything from just having someone look at your query letter and edit it, can look at your synopsis, can look at a combination of those, or can also include a 10 or a little bit more page critique on your first pages. Essentially, a query package could have anything for those varying prices. And the reason it's done for that is because typically when you are querying, you have to have a query letter, a synopsis, and at least 10 pages, sometimes as low as 5, sometimes as high as 50. It depends on each agent, but all of those are usually needed to submit a query to an agent in the literary world. So do you need a query critique professionally done? The short answer is no. This is definitely not needed, and in my own research, there was a lot of people that said that you don't have to go put out money in order to verify your skills. There are tons of free resources, and I will leave some of them linked down below. I mentioned many times the subreddit group Pub Tips, which you can post queries and get feedback on for free from people on the internet. And there are other things like that in forums and communities and just author friends or people on the internet that you can swap information with. And none of that costs a thing. However, in other areas of the publishing world, there are some published authors who would encourage you to buy a critique because it can help you stand out from others around you. For the most part, there's a good group of published authors that would say that, the better you are to present yourself in an appealing way, the more likely you are to succeed. So I've talked with a few people in conferences that were 100% no question asked, yes, you should buy query critiques. But overall, at the end of the day, you don't need them because you can prove that you are worthy of a book as long as your book and your writing is solid. And, it's wanted in the book world. It's definitely a lot harder than that because obviously the book world is so saturated. You can easily do all the things needed to query by yourself for free without having to spend money, because at the end of the day, not everyone can afford it. So it really comes down to, do you have the means and the desire to get a query package? I know that answer ends up not being as straightforward, but at the end of the day, no, you don't need to buy anything to make your writing better or to ever submit a query. You can do that all on your own. But if you do have the means and you have some questions as far as what you're doing, it might be worthwhile to put some money forward. So let's talk about why I specifically got a critique. And more specifically, I actually got 2 technically. My own reasons are pretty simple. This was my second time querying, and the first time around, I actually didn't do too much. It was for my co-written project. It was the first time diving into the waters of querying, and I did use a lot of the free resources and a lot of my own research to do querying before I did so. Now, I think the book itself, as I mentioned on this channel as well, and I will link if you want to look into my co-written journeys, there's definitely been a lot of ups and downs with that series. And we actually cut it back pretty short. We only ended up querying 20 authors total, and then we decided that our book needed a lot more work than we expected, especially because we got form rejections, no interest whatsoever. And yeah, the interest pool was very low, like 20 people out of like, what, 1,700 or some agents in the whole literary world, maybe more, because that might just be the United States. So we didn't really do a ton of exploration to see if anyone was interested in our book, but we decided for our own selves it would be the best decision to pull it and rework it, and then that led to further decisions. You could watch that video up above. But short and sweet is that we really didn't do a lot. We didn't make a synopsis when we wrote that book, so I never had any experience writing a synopsis and understanding what exactly goes into it. I also was extremely panicked over my query letter. I never felt confident, and even though I kept feeling like I was getting better and getting better and getting better, each time I would post it on like one of the free resources or ask someone to critique it, there was always something more that was needed. So I was hoping to get out of a critique a bit of tweaking with that. Additionally, I was also thinking that my first few pages were kind of boring, and that's not good for submitting a work. You want to be able to catch your agent very quickly and want them to keep reading so that they request more. So because of all those personal reasons, I was thinking that it would be good to get an outside opinion, and if I had to pay for that, that was okay. I have the means. I was putting money aside to do this anyway, and I wanted to do something that would hopefully set me apart in the query trenches. Most specifically, I really wanted feedback on my synopsis because I really had no resources on synopses as much as I did on query letters and just in general writing. I am glad that I ended up getting the synopsis critique because I did it wrong. I didn't format it right at all, so that was very helpful in that way. So now that I kind of talked about the reasons why I got one, and it was just to double check my facts and how I write things, I kind of want to go into the experience I had with the whole synopsis and query letter and the pages and how all of that feedback that I paid for came through. So first of all, I want to say that I had specifically in mind, I was initially going to choose an author who has pretty good commercial success, nothing crazy, like not a Sarah J. Maas or a George R.R. Martin, but was good enough, like her book was in book boxes and her name is attached to her website, which I thought was very important because there is a lot of transparency there. The reason I was going to go with that service initially is because I went into a conference with this author who is Mary Weber, and I was very impressed with her knowledge of the industry, how she presented herself, the information she presented, and the information she provided specifically for querying. So her services were actually $100, and it included a lot of free resources as well as a query letter critique, a synopsis critique, and the chance to send it back with revisions and get like another input, which I thought was great. However, that's not actually what I ended up doing, and I might be a little upset about it, to be honest, and I'll tell you a little bit more why. But let me kind of start to where I went. So I ended up not going with Mary's services because at the time I found a writing class from another decently successful author, and that author's friend, who was also a published author but went the self-publishing route. I did this class because there was a free 10-page critique attached to it that I could pay additional for. The catch was that I had to attend both classes in that day, which were about $60 for the two classes, in order to then get the 10-page critique, which was an additional $40. So the class itself, I think with taxes and everything, it was about $110. So it was actually more money than I wanted to spend for my critique package. And it was also less things than I expected to get because it wasn't dealing at all with the query or synopsis. It was just the 10 pages. However, I was also getting a 6-hour class attached to it, which I was hoping would be beneficial. Now, looking back in hindsight, the critique itself, I think, was good, and I'm very happy with the feedback that I got. But I don't think it justified the class that I took, and it was kind of unfortunate that I couldn't just pay for the critique because the class was wasting my money. I mentioned this before, and I could link that video up above if you guys are interested. But basically, the class was extremely rudimentary, and I did not feel it was justified to pay for the information I got in that class where I've already learned all of it online for free. So it definitely felt a bit scammy, and I know that was not the intention, and that's not necessarily what the authors were trying to do. But because I am already experienced and I am moving into the query trenches, the class itself was not for me. And it wasn't really put out that way, that it was super basic information and like very beginner level. So when I paid for the class, I thought I was really going to get more out of it. And unfortunately, I couldn't even ask questions because I felt like during the whole thing, the authors were a little out of touch with the current publishing industry. So I didn't really get a lot out of that. However, the $40 for the critique itself was well worth it. I wish I just didn't pay the extra money to do that class. But the critique itself was really helpful. Before I submitted that critique, I ended up going in and changing my first pages the way that I thought could be beneficial. And that was actually, I think, to my success because they were very captured with the 10 pages that I provided them. But they also gave a ton of feedback where one author, because I got a feedback on both authors, gave feedback. So again, for $40, I got two professional authors giving me input on the writing. One was a very technical critique where they went in and like line edited everything, which was beautiful. The other one was more of a concept critique where they went in and kind of said, like, if I was an agent reading this, you know, this is kind of boring. This maybe would be better moved up places. Like, this captured my attention a lot. So it was helpful because I got two very different styles and a lot of good feedback to make my pages strong. And I love my new pages completely because of that. So that is partially why I think getting a critique, at least for the 10 pages part, is worth it if there's transparency by who you're getting it from. Because I think knowing who is critiquing you and you can read all of their credentials, knowing what they've published or who they are or what they represent is important. I say this because going into my next part of what I got my query letter and my synopsis for, the transparency I don't think was quite as there. Now, just a slight caveat to when I did the critique to these two authors, they asked for a basic summary of my book. So what I did is I copied and pasted my query letter, just the body for the summary, right into that. And the one author actually, I'm assuming, knew what I did and critique that as well. So that was awesome because I really was able to get some better feedback on structuring my query letter of just, you know, again, cleaning it up, but also making it so that like the most important parts are sticking out. And while they didn't really know my novel, it was a nice way to clean up it. And that was very helpful. So because I paid for this class and it was already over my budget of the $100 that I planned on spending, I decided not to go with Mary Weber's whole course. And I think that was a mistake overall, but I wanted to try to be a little bit cheaper. And I felt like because I got the feedback unintentionally on my query letter, I decided to go the route of Fiverr to get my synopsis and my query letter looked at one more time. I really only wanted to do my synopsis, but it kind of was cheaper to do both because it was offered. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm a hit or miss with Fiverr. And I feel like, again, this is my own opinion, but the transparency is not always there on Fiverr. A lot of people can give really good critiques, but I don't feel like the people who are looking on Fiverr for getting these critiques, I don't think they also know what they want sometimes. So that while they can get really good feedback, it's not exactly the way that I wanted it to be. So part of my issue with Fiverr is that a lot of the names on Fiverr are, I think, made up or altered. So you're not actually going to be able to verify who these people are. So my example is that the person that I ended up going with on Fiverr, said that they are an age-10 author who is currently out on submission and had gotten a lot of interest in their novel based on their query letter, which is great to know. However, their name was completely unsearchable. I couldn't find anything to be able to verify, like, oh, who are they aged with, where is their book, I couldn't verify anything on social media, which is kind of, for me, that's where the transparency issue comes in, because if you did have success and you're offering this service, it would be nice to be able to trace you back to verify that you're not talking out of your ass. And this is the problem with Fiverr for most things, is a lot of people keep their name private. To some extent, I understand, because you don't want to be overwhelmed with work, but you can always turn off those features, or you can just get your own website or anything like that, So the fact that I couldn't search for anyone to back up what they were claiming was a little off-putting. Despite this, I still decided to go with it because it was only a $20 fee compared to the $100 that I wanted to initially spend on just one person. Again, I think that that's a difference between I knew I was paying $100 for really, really good information, and that's what I wanted to do, versus I'm paying much less money, $20, 15 to 25 really is the range, but I have no idea who these people are, and I don't know if they were going to give me the information I wanted. So while on one hand, I did get the synopsis feedback and they were able to format it for me, which I did not do properly initially, that was a big help. They also did tweak my query letter, and it was so-so. But really, the thing that lacked for me is that they just went through and line edited everything to make it stronger, which is great. But I really wanted more of a one-on-one approach where it was they can go in and tell me why something worked or why something didn't work, or, they didn't give me any sense of this makes sense. They didn't give me any feedback to say oh, I think you have a good start, and if you do some of these suggestions, it'll make it better. They didn't say if it the book itself made sense, or if it sounded like shit, which granted, I know that's opinion based, but that's what I wanted. And unfortunately I didn't get that. And that could be my own fault. But I just feel it's hard because I don't feel like I should give them a bad review because of this. It's just not what I was hoping for out of this critique. So I was able to get some line edits and I was able to clean up things, but I don't know if it works. I don't know if it would make sense to other people. They just did the minimum of, I'm just going to read and provide you editing services, and I'm not going to tell you any input on whether I think the book would work, or the way that you've written this makes sense, nothing like that. So that's where I'm a little bit, like I said, coming back to this whole picture of if you decide that you want to pay for a critique, do your research and make sure that the things that you are looking for, you're going to get out of it. I think if I was going to go this again and I decided to go to the Fiverr route, I would ask them if that was something they could provide as a little bit more insight on as a reader aspect versus just an editorial aspect. And maybe that would have been better if I did that. I also think that I would have just went with the person that I initially wanted to go with and paid the extra money, because I think that would have been worth it. The people that talked at the conference that had gone through this service had praised it significantly, and I feel like that's my detriment, that I didn't go with the author who I could literally verify has published multiple books, has a very good editing career, and is just very focused in and knows what they're talking about presently in the industry. And that is to my own fault, but that is what I'm going to part my wisdom off to you, is do your research, understand what you're getting when you're paying for something, and make sure that at the end of the day, you are going to be happy with what you paid for. So in my whole experience with this, there's definitely some ups and downs with it. And while I enjoy some of the things that I got back, I had issues with other things. So it definitely was a little bit of back and forth for me. And, I'm not 100% satisfied with the feedback that I got, but I'm happy I did it because it pushed me to just say whatever, I'm going to put it out. It hopefully will be enough that even if it's a little bit of a rough, synopsis or query letter, someone is going to read my pages and really like the story and how it starts. That would be my goal. But at the end of the day, what I think is really good about getting the query critique for me is that I now kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. After getting feedback on various levels, both for free and for paid, I feel a little bit more comfortable being able to do this on my own next time. And I don't feel like I'm going to have to pay for anything, because just even comparing my prophecy project to my Project Mermaid, like I feel like Project Mermaid is already going to be so much stronger. It's definitely a different book than Prophecy Project, and it's at a different stage in my life when I'm writing this, or I feel much more of a comfortable writer. But I've already done rough drafts and pitches, and it's so much cleaner to do this way now that I have all the knowledge I have. I feel like I could easily pitch this and write a query letter and write a synopsis easily. So either way, I'm not mad at the feedback that I got fully, because it will help me moving forward. I know how to format a synopsis now. I know the query letter, I feel like I'm getting better, and I can do that much easier with Mermaid than I did previously with Prophecy or my co-written project. And I feel super comfortable with my beginning pages of Mermaid. So even if they're not the cleanest, I think any project moving forward, I would be able to get way more attention if Prophecy doesn't work. So here we are at the end of the discussion. Thank you, first of all, for listening to my rambles. And I hope this made sense, because at the end of the day, I do think it's valuable to know what people go through when they are planning to query. So while no, you don't need to buy anything, I do think there can be benefits, especially if you're like me and I had no one to really talk to about this stuff, because all of my writer friends aren't at this stage. I am like the sole person here that is going into the query trenches in my writing friend group for the first time. And I'm kind of navigating it solo and learning as I go, which hopefully that means I will be able to impart my wisdom on them one day when they're getting there. But it is kind of a weird place to be in, because I didn't have as much like resources at my disposal. So I think for me, paying for it was the most beneficial thing I could have done. While I might have done differently in who I chose to do it, that would be what I would say for you guys, is just, again, make sure you do your research and make sure that you're comfortable with who's going to provide you the information, and ask questions if you need to, because that was my biggest detriment, is that I didn't do that properly. And my gut instinct was to go with someone that I think would have been even better for me in the end. It's hard to get just objective advice, and sometimes paying for it is the best way to do that and get honest feedback, because obviously someone is doing a service for a fee, so they're going to want to give you the best information and, you know, your money's worth. So I hope that kind of describes like the pros and cons maybe of how getting a critique in any form for your query package could be beneficial or could be harmful for you. And I hope it makes your decision easier if you get to this point and you're considering it yourself. I will leave the resources down below for all the things that I mentioned if you are interested, and maybe you're going to be querying soon yourself. And I hope that when you guys get to your own query journey, you will feel a little bit more confident going into it than I did. If I left out anything in this video, feel free to leave a comment down below and ask questions. I am not like a professional at this. I'm literally a beginner myself going into the query trenches. So I can't promise that I will have all the answers, and I can't promise that they're going to be the best answer for you. At the end of the day, you guys have to make your own decisions and do what's best for you. But if you feel like you're in a similar position as me and maybe what I did might be helpful, ask away. If you want any other video topics related to querying, let me know down in the comments, and I will try to do some of those sit down videos. And otherwise, guys, thank you so much for hanging with me. I hope to have some good conversations in the comments, and until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.